Hello, I'm Anne McNabb, and if you're watching this video, it's most likely because I've asked you to complete a DiSC online questionnaire, a questionnaire that will then generate your personal professional DiSC profile report. In this video, I'm going to explain a bit about the background of DiSC and how it works. And then when we come together, we'll work on how best to make that useful for you in whatever area of professional development is your particular priority. So enjoy, and I'll see you soon. Firstly, a little background. In 1928, a Harvard-educated psychologist, William Moulton Marston, published the book Emotions of Normal People. In that book, he outlined some core principles that underlie what we now call DiSC. Interestingly, Marston was also a qualified lawyer, invented the blood pressure monitor and the earliest version of a lie detector. He even created Wonder Woman. In his career as a psychological practitioner, though, Marston made a deliberate decision to focus only on psychological phenomena that were directly observable, psychological phenomena that were measurable through objective means. Some key principles arising from his career-long observations included the fact that our behaviour is influenced by our environment, that there are some predictable patterns to behaviour, and that these could be represented visually using an axis model. On that axis model, Marston theorised that the behavioural expression of emotions could be categorised into 4 primary behavioural styles. These behavioural tendencies stem from the person's perception of themselves in relation to their environment. And nearly 100 years later, this work has evolved into the widely known 4-quadrant DiSC model seen here. A personal DiSC profile can be accessed via multiple providers worldwide, and over 30 million people have had one generated. The provider I use is Wiley's Everything DiSC, but all providers are based on the same basic DiSC model. They simply use different colours and have different report designs. I have personally worked in a professional context with DiSC for nearly 20 years now, and it still honestly never ceases to amaze me how accurate and helpful these simple 4 quadrants of behaviour styles are. They help us understand what makes ourselves and others tick so that we can apply them to move ourselves forward. So let's have a look at them a bit more closely. So here are the 4 DISC quadrants again. I'm going to go through each one in turn and give you a little summary of what the behaviour styles are most likely to look like for each one of the quadrants. It's important to remember as I do that we are not one of these quadrants. None of us live in only one of these quadrants. We all will use some behaviours from probably most of the quadrants, but what we do have is a quadrant that feels like our home base, or maybe 2. And while I'm explaining this to you, it would be good for you to think about which one of these represents the behaviours that I use most often, in particular in a work environment. So let's start firstly with D. You'll notice here on the screen that I've put D means dominance, which is what is in the reports and the models, with the word drive in brackets underneath. That's because I personally, after years of working with DiSC, feel that dominance is a word that has automatically quite negative connotations, and so I think the word drive better represents what the behaviours in this quadrant are about. Let me explain. The first thing I'm going to show you is an arrow. This arrow represents what it is that motivates someone to display the behaviours that I'm about to show you. So if you remember nothing else about DiSC, remember the arrows. When someone's behaving in the behaviours that are in the D-style quadrant, it's because in that moment they're focused on getting results. And because they're focused on getting results, that makes them behave in these kind of ways. So you're going to see someone who wants to get things done, someone who's driven, someone who's got pace, someone who can take decisions and keep momentum, keep things moving forward. Who wouldn't want these types of behaviours in the workplace because they deliver? But for all the DiSC styles, when they are either overused, i.e. too strongly, or used inappropriately, and by that I mean they're not the most appropriate behaviours for the situation or the people involved, then, like with all the other styles, they can become a problem. And in this case, they can become dominant, domineering, even potentially bullying. So other people may experience overuse or inappropriate use of D behaviours as a little bit demanding, a little bit aggressive even, and as I said before, potentially domineering and bullying. Moving on then to the I style. Well, some of you will and some of you won't have noticed that this is a lowercase I, and you might be wondering why. The reality is that no one knows, or I haven't found anyone that knows. The urban myth is that when Wiley went to register their version of the DiSC model and profile, somebody made a typo and put a lowercase I. The other story is it's their way of distinguishing themselves from the other providers. I don't know, but it just is a lowercase I. I stands for influence. And when people behave in the behaviours I'm about to show you here, it's because what they are motivated by in that moment is appreciation. So appreciation for themselves, for the work they're doing, or possibly even appreciation for other people and the work they're doing, like their team. Because they're driven by that desire or that motivation, you're going to see these kind of behaviours. These are optimistic, creative kind of people, innovative, a bit rule-breaking. They can be motivating to be around. It can be quite a positive experience. But as I said for the D style, when overused or used with people and situations where these behaviours are not appropriate, they can come across to other people as a bit overwhelming, in your face, downright annoying. So again, good things that they bring to potentially teamwork or individual work, but overuse can bring problems. Now these two styles together are the ones that are most likely to come across as extroverts. These are people who are not afraid to say what they think and who will quite often speak to think, using up airtime. Moving on then to the third style, so I'll just turn my camera off here. Oh, I can't turn my camera off. The third style, it says underneath my face there, steadiness, S for steadiness. So in this block of behaviours, what you're getting is people who are driven in that moment by the need for harmony. Now they mean harmony of relationships, but they also mean harmony of process. So they want things to be stable, they want things to be predictable. And because that's what they're seeking, what you're going to get is these kind of behaviours. These are good team players, people who like to watch out for how other people are, people who don't like conflict and because of that are often quite good at helping others resolve conflict, people who look calm and level-headed, at least on the surface. But actually underneath the surface they may not feel quite the same as they do externally. And overuse of this behaviour or inappropriate use of this behaviour in situations where it's not the most useful might mean that this person feels taken for granted, might feel put upon, might have their needs last. And indeed, sometimes they even explode with frustration over something that seems very small, but really it's just the straw that broke the camel's back. So on a good day, who wouldn't want these behaviours? Great for promoting teamwork, great for getting things done quietly and reliably behind the scenes, great for making sure it's a good experience. On a bad day, that can be at the expense of the individual themselves. When we look then at the right hand side of the circle, the red and the blue, so that's the I for influence and the S for steadiness, what we see here is behavioural styles that are focused mainly on people or relationships, so that's the priority lens through which they see things. They're also very aware of their own and other people's feelings, and they'll take account of that and their intuition in decision making. Last but not least then, let's have a look at C for conscientiousness, or compliance if you can't spell conscientiousness. Individuals whose home style is here are focused mostly on correctness, accuracy, getting things done and done well. And because of that motivation, what you're going to see is these kinds of behaviours. So these are people who think that if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. They're not going to give 100%, they're going to give 110%. They want to feel that they know what they're doing. They're not going to fly by the seat of their pants. They also don't like anything that might be a threat to that correctness, so they're going to look all the time for what might go wrong and try and fix it. Who wouldn't want this? High quality work, deep and thoughtful work, work that's going to deliver what it said it would. However, just like the other styles, when overused or used inappropriately to the situation, these individuals risk coming across to other people as naysayers, as negative, as always pointing out what's wrong, as always dragging things down. The other challenge they sometimes have is not being able to prioritise, because there's only 24 hours even in a C day, and not everything can be done to 110%, or without some personal expense anyway. So that's the world according to the C style. When we look across the bottom of the circle then at the S for steadiness and C for conscientiousness, what we get is people who tend to be more introvert than extrovert, people who think before they speak, people who are certainly likely to speak a lot less than the people whose home base is in the top part of the circle. Finally then, we can look at the left side, and what we see there is the D for dominance and the C for conscientiousness, and together these people focus on task, getting things done, and they're much more aware of facts and evidence potentially than their own feelings or the feelings of other people, and that's what they will base their decisions on. So there you have it, the whole DiSC circle in summary. Now what you will get when you get your DiSC profile is some insight not into which one you are, but which one you use most often when you're at work. The way this shows up in the profile is by a dot. So this is where my own dot is. I'm an IS, so I'm an I home base, but I also have a sufficient amount of S that I show very close to the S quadrant. This means that the way in which I approach my work is mostly represented by the behaviours on the right hand side. That doesn't mean I can't do the behaviours on the other side, it just means it takes more conscious effort and energy for me to do so. But your dot might be here, might be here, might be anywhere else on the circle. The only other thing that's important is the degree to which it's on the outside versus the inside. The more your dot's on the outside, like my own, the more strongly representative you are of that stereotype style. The more it's towards the middle, the less strongly leaning you are that way. So take a moment to look at the circle. I'll leave it without my photo on it. And if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask me, you can do so when we meet. Your preferred DiSC style can have a powerful effect on how you prefer to communicate with others, which then in turn influences how well you can influence them successfully. If everyone in the world was the same DiSC style with the same communication preferences and tendencies, then maybe we would all communicate more effectively than we do. But of course, we're not. And so one of the many things that DiSC is helpful for is to give us insights into the way we like to communicate and how that differs from others. That then allows us the opportunity of adapting the way we communicate to be more successful in influencing other people. Let's have a quick look at some more of that. So for each one of the styles here, what I've got for you is some information about their preference in terms of tone of voice. Let's just take a second to have a look at each one. So you might notice here that not only are these very different, but the ones that are diagonally opposite, in other words D and S and I and C, are most different from each other. So that immediately says that when communicating, those different styles are likely to approach things from basically polar opposite strategies. With that kind of tone of voice and timbre and pace comes some other preferences in terms of how these styles prefer to be communicated with. So going through D, I, S and C. Again, we can see the different preferences, but if you look in particular at the diagonally opposite ones, you can see again how they are likely to conflict. So if I just look, for example, at D, please be direct, to the point, be focused on results and objectives, be brief, be bright, be gone. Whereas an S wants patience and supportiveness, wants to slow down, not because they are slow, but to consider things, to be thoughtful, wants to be included, have their opinion asked, not to just it to be assumed that they'll foist it on someone. Then if we look at the I and the S, the I is very friendly and sociable, engaging, open, flexible, rule breaking, whereas the C likes to be the absolute opposite, prepared, thorough, formal, things in writing, not on the spur of the moment. So very clearly we can see how differences could arise in terms of successful communication. Here are the don'ts. And again, we can see the wide range of things that people do and don't respond well to when communicating. So there are some more things here on this slide, and when I meet with you, I will give you a copy both of the DiSC circles and also of this slide as well for you to reflect on. But if your area of preferred professional development happens to be around communication, You might want to pause the slide here and take some time to think about how your DiSC style might be playing a role in how well or not you're managing to communicate and influence other people. So, now you know a little more about DiSC behavioural styles and the DiSC circle. Before we meet, you might want to reflect on where you think your DiSC dot might be, and in particular, how might the resulting behaviours and communication preferences be impacting you in the area of professional development that you're choosing to focus on? How might it be influencing your behaviours and therefore your success or not in that area? There are several types of DiSC reports available, and I will have asked you to complete an online questionnaire for a specific one. When we meet, we will use that profile to examine where your actual DiSC dot is and what that means. And importantly, much of that conversation will be us exploring how that can contribute and help you develop yourself professionally in the areas that are most important to you right now. I'm looking forward to working with you shortly, and I'm sure that you'll find it beneficial. See you soon. Thank you for watching this Introduction to DiSC Behavioural Styles video snippet.